Ok, hola otra vez. Aquí estamos en lección 5.2. And today we're going to talk about the present progressive tense. I've seen a lot of you guys try to use this with varying degrees of success. So please pay attention specifically to when we do and do not use this tense. That'll come here in a couple of slides. But let's give an overview. Both English and Spanish use the present progressive tense. It's the form of the verb to be in Spanish, estar, always, and then the present participle of another verb, which is the ing form in Spanish. I am eating, I am studying, I am going, I am doing. In Spanish, we use the verb estar plus this present participle of the verb, and only estar gets conjugated. The present participle stays the same for everybody. It doesn't change for number, and it does not change for gender. Very important concepts. So aquí, por ejemplo, las chicas están hablando con el empleado en el hotel o del hotel. We see están hablando. Están is the form of estar that matches the case. So it's present tense and it's third person plural for ellas, for las chicas. And then hablando is the present participle of the verb hablar. En la segunda foto tenemos estás estudiando en la playa. Estás, because it's talking the to form, so it's the present tense of the to form of estar. And then estudiando, which is the present participle of the verb estudiar. So those are some examples of how it's used both in English and in Spanish. To form the present progressive, the present participle, we use estar with this present participle together. So only the verb estar gets conjugated according to all the rules you already know. Estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. So now whatever the noun, the subject of the sentence is, estar is going to get conjugated according to that subject, and then the present participle, which is the same for all tenses. So in this example, yo estoy pescando. It could be yo estoy pescando. Tú estás pescando. Usted, él, ella está pescando. Nosotros estamos pescando. Vosotros, vosotras estáis pescando. Ustedes, ellos, ellas están pescando. So only the verb estar gets conjugated. The present participle stays the same for every other tense. So estoy pescando, estamos comiendo. Again, estar plus this present participle. So let's look at how to form this present participle. Very, very easy. You take the stem of the infinitive, which you've gone through many times. That's taking out the AR, the ER, or the IR ending, taking that off and adding ANDO for an AR verb or IENDO for an ER or IR verb. So aquí en la caja tenemos hablar. The stem becomes hable. The ending for an AR verb is ando. So we have the present participle hablando. For an ER verb comer, we have com, which is the stem. We add yendo, IENDO, and we have comiendo. For escribir, an IR verb, we have the stem escrib, the ending, yendo, we have escribiendo. That is 99% of it right there. Take off the AR, add ANDO, take off the ER or the IR, add IENDO, yendo. Now, as you all know, there are always going to be some exceptions. Well, the first exception we're going to look at is the spelling of that ending. When the stem of an AR or an IR verb, when the stem of an ER or an IR verb ends in a vowel, that I from the yendo gets replaced with a Y. Okay, so for example, leer, the stem is just LE, so that ends in a vowel. We're going to change the IENDO to YENDO, so it's leyendo, and it really is just a pronunciation thing. If you had leyendo with an I, it would just be a lot of vowels in a row, so we're changing that to the YENDO. Oír, IR verb, take out the stem, you have just O. Instead of oyendo with an O-I-E-N-D-O, we change that I in the ending to yendo, oyendo. In traer, we have the stem tra, T-R-A. It ends in a vowel, so we're going to change the I-E-N-D-O to Y-E-N-D-O, trayendo. Okay? Now, there's one exception to this exception, and that is that when the verb when the stem ends in a U, because there's an IR after it. Remember that U is really a silent U. It's there to make the G, make that hard sound in it. So the IENDO does not change to yendo. And here's an example. Really the only verb that I could think of, as I went through all the ones I could think of, is the verb seguir and different forms of seguir. Seguir means to follow. We've had that verb before. Then there's conseguir, proseguir, perseguir, so different forms of that verb seguir. But remember that this is pronounced seguir, not seguir, because the U is silent. The U is making that G make its hard sound. The stem then changes. You take out the IR, we have segu, and that is, the G is going to still be there because we're going to keep the yendo on the end, and that U is still there to make the G say its hard sound. So it becomes siguiendo. Now, the fact that we have siguiendo from the verb seguir leads to the next rule, which is there are some words that are going to be stem changing. If it's stem changing in the present tense, it's going to be stem changing in the present participle. A little bit differently, E to IE is only going to go to E to I. That's for ER and for IR verbs both. So if it's IE stem changing, it's going to stay the E instead of going to IE is going to go just to I. And if it's E to I, it's going to stay E to I. And if it's O to UE, it's going to be just O. Okay, and these are only for IR stem changing verbs. So we have preferir. In the present tense, it's prefiero, prefieres, prefiere, preferimos, preferís, prefieren. So it's E to IE. The present participle is prefiriendo. Just goes to I only. The verb conseguir, and that's, we have that example from the verb that are related to the verb seguir. The E to I in the present is consigo, consigues, consigue, conseguimos, conseguís, consiguen. In the participle, the present participle is going to be consiguiendo. So it's going to stay the E to I in that present participle. And then O to UE, dormir. We talked about duermo, duermes, duerme, dormimos, dormís, duermen. It just goes O to U in the present participle, so durmiendo. So IR stem changing verbs, if it's E to IE, it's going to be just E to I. If it's E to I, it's going to stay E to I. And if it's O to UE, it's going to be just O to U in the present participle. So again, just an exception to the exception of stem changing verbs. You can have to just remember and practice that one. Okay, there are some irregular verbs, and these are the three. They're not very common. In fact, two of these are very, very rare. Ir, the verb to go, becomes yendo. And remember, because ir is irregular almost everywhere, because if you take out the IR, you have nothing. And so instead of having IENDO, which would be the ending, we have YENDO. So it's yendo. And that's a very rare form. And we'll come to that in just a couple of minutes. Poder, poder, we talked about on the last slide that on IR verbs, if it's O to UE, it goes to O to U. That doesn't happen very much for ER verbs, but poder is one exception. So it's pudiendo. So it's not podiendo and it's not puediendo. It does stem change in the present tense, but not in the participle. It goes O to UE, or O just to U instead of UE. So it's pudiendo, and that's rare too. Imagine saying, I am being able to eat. It's just not, context-wise, it's not a very helpful verb in this tense. Venir goes to viniendo. So same thing, it's I to IE, but now it's going to be just, E to IE in the present tense, but it's just going to be E to I, viniendo. Okay, so let's talk about format and use. The present progressive tense is much more limited, restricted in Spanish than it is in English. In English, we use this a lot. Hey, tonight I'm going to the store. In 6 months, we're going to Europe. What are you studying in school? Oh, I'm studying nursing. We use that a lot. In Spanish, the present progressive tense is limited to what you're literally doing right now. Right now. So, right now, yo estoy hablando. What are you doing tomorrow? Well, I can't say tomorrow I'm talking to my friends because I'm not doing it in that moment. So we use just the present tense. Mañana hablo con mis amigos. Right now, I'm reading this slide. Yo estoy leyendo. What book are you reading? Well, I'm reading Moby Dick. Well, I'm not literally reading it right now, and so you would say leo instead of estoy leyendo. So this estar and the participle form are only used for things that are done immediately. So if someone says, instead of asking somebody, what are you studying at ISU? You wouldn't say, ¿Qué estás estudiando en ISU? Because unless they're literally there sitting in the classroom right now, They're not estar estudiando anything. So you say, ¿qué estudias en ISU? Oh, estudio enfermería, o estudio deportes, estudio medicina. But you're not estar estudiando that thing right in that minute. Now, if somebody walks up to you in the library and say, hey, ¿qué estás estudiando? Oh, estoy estudiando español. Like I'm literally right now in this second studying Spanish. That's perfectly fine. But not just in general text. Like, what are you doing generally? Not trying to overcomplicate this, but I would say the majority of the times that I've seen it so far this semester, when some of you have tried it in quizzes, would not work. You've conjugated it appropriately, but the context would not work for what you've used it for. So let's go through some examples. It says the use of the present progressive is much more restricted in Spanish. In Spanish, the present progressive is mainly used to emphasize that an action is in progress at the time of speaking. Maru está escuchando música latina ahora mismo, right in this sentence. Felipe y su amigo todavía están jugando al fútbol. They are still playing football right now. While we and I are talking, Felipe and his friends are playing football in this moment. It's in progress. In English, the present progressive is often used to talk about situations and actions that occur over an extended period of time or in the future. But in Spanish, the simple present tense, the one we've already learned, is used instead. So Javier estudia computación este semestre. He's studying computer science this semester, but he's not literally right now in this sentence doing something to be studying this tema. Marisa sale mañana para los Estados Unidos. She's leaving tomorrow for the United States, but she's not in the process of leaving right now. So Marisa sale. She's not, we wouldn't say Marisa está saliendo unless she's physically on a plane getting ready to depart. Okay, so progressive means it's progressing in the present tense right now. We don't use this form to express anything happening in the future. So if you say, what are you doing tonight with your friends? You can't use this present progressive tense because you're not doing it right now. You're planning on doing it. So, ¿qué haces esta noche? Vamos a comer, vamos a salir al cine, vamos a bailar, right? You can use those other tenses, but you can't use this present tense, this present progressive tense to indicate something that's not literally happening right now. Okay, so you have to understand that context. And I would say if you have to go back and study anything, read through that section of Panorama or listen to my elongated explanation a couple times, or text me or email me or come to the Zoom. But understand that the forming of it is pretty easy. And these next two exercises are really just making sure you can form the verbs appropriately. That's not going to give you those answers on context. You'll have to just understand that it has to be happening in the second to use that present progressive tense. So in this example, you're going to number your papers from 1 through 9, and you're going to just form the present. So the simple present, you're going to change it to this present progressive tense. Remember that they don't change for plural. They don't change, the participles themselves don't change for plurality and don't change for gender. So don't be giving me andas and andos. It's only going to be that yendo or the ando form. So pause, write out your answers, come back, we'll talk about it. Okay, número 1. Si vamos a decir yo hablo, podemos decir yo estoy hablando. Número 2, él come, viene a ser él está comiendo. Número 3, ellas escriben, se convierte en ellas están escribiendo. Número 4, Javier lee, Javier está leyendo with the Y. Número 5, Paola oye, Paola está oyendo. Número 6, María trae, María está trayendo. Número 7, Julia y Juan duermen, están durmiendo. Okay, that's that O to UE in the present tense goes to O to U in the participle. Número 8, Carmen piensa, Carmen está pensando. Número 9, nosotros pedimos. Pedir is E to I, so nosotros estamos pidiendo. So you got to imagine there are a couple things you got to do there. You got to make sure you get the estar conjugated correctly, get the participle form correctly, leave it the way it is. If it's an exception, then change it. But again, you don't see any that the participles did not change for a female subject or for a plural subject. Okay. Going backwards, so sorry. All right, next one, práctica número 2. You're going to change each sentence from the present tense to progressive tense. Again, so a similar thing, but now we've, instead of just doing the subject and the verb, we've added a couple other words into there. So 1 through 6, and come back, we'll take a look at this. Número 1, nosotros bailamos salsa. Nosotros estamos bailando salsa. Gloria y Luisa recorren Viejo San Juan. Ellas están recorriendo Viejo San Juan. Número 3, Ramón saca fotos de la gente. Ramón está sacando fotos de la gente. Número 7, tú sales con Lucía, ¿no? Tú estás saliendo con Lucía, ¿no? Remember we talked about that with the verb salir means to be dating somebody. Número 5, yo leo el periódico. Yo estoy leyendo el periódico. Y número 6, los señores Montoya escriben tarjetas postales. Los señores Montoya están escribiendo tarjetas postales. Okay, so the big thing here is how to form this. Notice that there are no examples of the verb ser being used with the participle. It's always estar. Always, always, always going to be estar. You conjugate estar according to the subject. So first, second, third person, singular or plural, and then you form the participle. In the majority of them, you're going to take out the AR, add ando, take out the ER or IR, add yendo. There are a couple examples, a couple exceptions of when that I goes to Y, and if they're stem changing IR in the present tense, they're going to be stem changing in this participle as well. So it really is it's going to expand your ability. Just use it correctly. This is a great responsibility to use this present progressive tense appropriately. Don't overuse it, don't misuse it. And if you have a question on what that means, let me know. Thanks, guys. Nos vemos.